recently, players have been posting their favorite and least favorite stages in Rivals 2. So I thought it would be super fun to add it all up and see what the community actually thinks of each stage as a whole. I asked my viewers to rank each stage on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being labeled as strongly hate and 10 being the perfect stage. However, I also left them a note saying that each stage didn't need to be its own number. For example, if you think Air Armada and Hyperborean Harbor are both 8s out of 10s, you could put them both there. You'd be an outlier for sure, but that's up to you. I also noted that you don't have to rank any stage at 1 or 10, meaning that if you think there's not a perfect stage and there's no terrible stages, you just don't have to use those rankings at all. Based on our previous video like this, however, I was pretty sure these 1 in 10 rankings would be a lot rarer and scarcely used. But as we'll soon see, that wasn't the case. You guys have really strong feelings about a few of these stages. To kick us off, I asked the community what their rank was. We had over 80 responses in total, with about 22% of our players being in silver or below, 40% in gold, 20% in plat, 7% in diamond, and about 11% being in masters or above. Congrats, by the way, if you're all the way up there. This means our data is a bit skewed today, since around 60% of the players filling out this survey are gold and below, with the other 40% being spread out across the higher half of the ranks. I also asked responders who they main, and while most of the responders play Arcane and very few people main Raster, Rano, and Maple, we generally had a pretty even spread. To make sure I'm sharing accurate information though, I'll keep these stats in mind. First, I'll rank stages based on their overall feedback from everyone, and then I'll rank stages based on your elo, just so we get a clear picture. I'll also mention if there's any character outliers within the rankings. For example, if Crag players tended to rank Hyperborean Harbor higher than everyone else, that would be noted, just to make sure I'm not misleading anyone. Even though I will be talking about characters today, I do have a much more in-depth stage picking guide from a few months ago. I'll leave it linked down below in the description, but truthfully it is a bit dated, so don't worry, I'll be updating it here pretty soon. I also asked players for written feedback, so I'll be pulling quotes from there while we talk about each stage, as well as what they considered to be the most valuable when they ranked the stages. Most players said the layout, but the blast zones and vibes were also ranked kinda high. I personally added vibes to this list, since some stages give me an ick visually, like Kalos Pokemon League from Smash Ultimate, so I'm kind of amused that I'm not the only one that thinks this way. Surprisingly, how your main and how your opponent's mains do on the stage wasn't a big factor in either of these rankings. Before we break down the data, by the way, it'd be so awesome for you to leave a like if you enjoyed this video at any point. It lets me know that this is the kind of content you want to see, and that I should keep on doing community rankings. On the topic of these videos though, if you have a topic you'd like to see me poll the community about, put it down in the comments and I'll add it on my list of to-do things. To start our rankings, I think we should start from the bottom and work our way up to the top. For our worst stage at number 10, we have Air Armada. Truthfully, this stage was kinda hard to rank, since it had less votes at 1 than another stage, but overall it did score the lowest when I averaged them out. This makes sense, however, since the stage just doesn't have walls, and is pretty polarizing in a lot of matchups. Crag and Arcane players rated this stage the highest out of anyone, but even then their average score for the stage was somewhere between a 6 and 7 out of 10 for both of them, with less than 10 players in total giving the stage a rating higher than 7. This stage didn't have a lot of player feedback in the comments, surprisingly. However, the responders that did take their time to comment on it said that they like the layout, but it not having a wall is kinda bad. Truthfully, I think that's why this stage is limited to being a counter pick, since it's designed to be a bit more unique. But sadly, or maybe not so sadly, that's why it lands here at the bottom of our list. Air Armada is our only stage with a net score below 5, clocking in at a 4.3 out of 10. Moving on to our second lowest voted stage, at number 9, we have Fire Capital. Fire Capital is the biggest stage in the game, making it pretty tricky to traverse and close gaps, especially for characters that don't have a projectile that they can just run behind, or great burst movement. Most players, on average, rated this stage pretty low, with some noting that games seem to take much longer here, and another commenting that Fire Capital is proof that there's darkness in Dan Farnace's heart. Other players, though, seem to enjoy it, saying that the stage size promoted them to chase opponents off stage, since securing kills from on stage was a lot harder. Overall, Loxodont players rated this stage pretty high due to how their character can cover lots of options on platforms, but even then some Lox players rated it pretty low. In good news, however, the stage hops up a tier on our list, clocking in with a flat score of 5.0. Coming up in 8th, we have Hyperborean Harbor. Ironically, Harbor had the most 1s voted for it, but it had a lot of high and mid ratings to even it out, giving it a more rounded out score. Players in the comments were a lot more vocal about this stage, not only commenting on its old walls, but also voicing that the low ceiling makes the stage not ideal when fighting characters like Zetterburn, that have moves that kill off the top starting pretty early. Speaking of Zetterburn, Zetter, Crag, and Rano players consistently rated this stage highly, while Claren mains always rated this stage badly. Everyone else across the board was more of a mixed bag, but I'd imagine that's more due to them weighing the benefits and negatives of this stage and deciding on a mid ranking, earning Hyperborean Harbor a median score of 5.1 out of 10. I know that you've all been waiting with bated breath for Stage 7, and it's Tempest Peak. It is our smallest stage that we've mentioned so far, but I'm not necessarily sure if this is a good thing, as most of the responders pointed out that Tempest Peak doesn't really add anything new that the starter stages don't to the small stage category. However, a lot of players who main short-range characters noted that this is by far their favorite of the counter picks, since if someone who prefers more wiggle room bans 2 of the smaller starter stages, this becomes their go-to. Tempest did have the highest rating from Forsburn players, and diverse ratings across the rest of the roster. These ratings were overall notably better than our past few stages, landing at a total score of 6.1 and jumping up a tier. Sorry to interrupt, I'm adding this in while I'm editing, but a friend of mine sent me a Valhalla Esports Hockey Loxodont code, and I was hoping to give it away to a random commenter on the channel. I'll be picking one random commenter from one of my next 5 videos to send it over to. Thanks tons for watching, and let's get back to those rankings. These next few stages were all within a fraction of a decimal of each other, so even 1 or 2 more responders could definitely shake up their order. But coming in at number 6 on our ranking today is the triplat that we all know and love, Hodojo. This stage was pretty well received across the board, with many players noting that it's not their favorite, but far from their least. The players that did dislike it cited that they just prefer less platforms, and the players that did like it pointed to enjoying extending combos and pushing their juggle game with that top plat. Loxodont and Zetterburn mains ranked this stage really high, however, but Raster mains sadly ranked it really low. Raster is one of our smaller source groups though, so this might just be a data error. Overall, Hodojo did earn a score of 6.73. That second digit does matter, since as I said the next 2 stages were neck and neck with Hodojo in the rankings. We're halfway done now with stage number 5 being Etherean Forest. Forest is the shortest starter and has a swinging platform, which should be pretty familiar to P+ players. Players rated this stage pretty well, but the players who didn't noted that the platform being inconsistent was sadly a turnoff for them. I personally find the moving platform to be fun and unique to play around, but if your character needs it for follow-ups, it's definitely far from consistent. There isn't really a character that rated this stage super high, or at least not higher than any other character, which points to this stage being a lot more neutral overall. It landed on a score of 6.76. Finally, we're moving on to stage 4. We have Merchant Port here. Truthfully, I'm a little surprised to see Merchant Port this high, since I assumed it would get a lower ranking like Fire Capital due to its size. But obviously, Merchant Port is a little smaller than Fire Capital, which probably helps it out a bit in these rankings. With that being said, it's still the largest of the starters, and players noted that it being so spacious allows them to approach matchups with more caution and carefulness, instead of being forced into a close quarter fight non-stop. Overall, Arcane players loved Merchant Port, scoring it highly across the board. Its final score landed at a 6.9. Leave a like if you get it. Entering into our top 3, we have one of my favorite stages, Rockwall. Players noted that the short side blast zones were really fun to play around, since ledge guarding and trapping was much more rewarding, and getting a hit at the ledge can normally confirm into some kind of kill if you push the confirm hard enough. The platform layout also gives characters that normally wouldn't have a ladder access to a kind of pseudo ladder combo by resetting up airs or drag down tools with a hitfall. Overall, this stage has a lot of room for players to fight on, but it also encourages aggressive play, both off the side and on the top. Most notably, Maple and Olympia mains both rated the stage really highly, but most characters rated the stage highly in general, earning it a 7.4 out of 10 and making it our most popular counterpick. There's only 2 stages left, and the second is Godai Delta. A lot of players cited Godai as being their go-to stage, naming it the most neutral stage in the game due to its platforms being a standard size that enables combos, but also not so crazy that they limit players' options or introduce an absurd amount of variance. Players also noted that the blast zones being pretty standard here helps keep the game predictable, since you're probably not going to die absurdly early or live to numbers that I can't count to. I really wish I could highlight a character here, but just about every player base rated this stage the same, earning it a score of 7.5 out of 10, not so far off from Rockwall. Our last and most popular stage is Julesville. Players said they really liked the moving platform since, compared to Ethereum Forest, it is a lot more predictable and doesn't necessarily interrupt your combos by running away from you into the sky. Players noted that the top platform, however, was a little inconsistent and could be a turnoff. But truthfully, I think it's not as big of a problem as some people make it out to be due to it not being there too frequently. Funnily enough, Julesville wasn't given the most 10 out of 10 scores. That prize went to Rockwall. However, more players rated that stage lowly, making Julesville's final score a little higher at a 7.9. As promised, let's check out the stages based on player rank. I think the easiest way to do this is by grouping the gold and below players and the platinum and above players, since otherwise our data pools get a little small and uneven, which can kind of warp our info just a bit more than I'd like. In our lower ranked players, I noticed that most of them really hated the more volatile stages. Stages like Rockwall, Hyperborean Harbor, and Ethereum Forest were typically rated a little lower than average. However, Hyperborean Harbor had more of a correlation to character than the other two did. A trend I saw for these stages was that they felt unsafe picking them, due to how explosive players could be. I'd imagine players in this tier analyzed the risk-reward to not feel in their favor, or that they weren't 100% sure how to punish opponents for bad positioning with such dangerous blast zones. On the other hand, lower ranked players also rated stages with a bit more breathing room a little higher than the high level players. Stages like Merchant Port and Fire Capital had higher scores across the board, but not by so much that it made them drastically different in their placements on our tier list. Speaking of that, here's an updated version of it for the players ranked from Stone to Gold. Higher level players didn't necessarily vote in the opposite order of the lower level players, since truthfully, most of their votes correlate more to their character than their rank. For example, the Silver Arcane players tended to have loosely aligned voting, if even that, whereas the higher level Arcane players tended to show more of a trend in what stages they preferred. However, from what I can gather, higher level players tended to vote a bit more nicely towards Rockwall, Ethereum Forest, and Harbor. Harbor still had lower scores here, but as I mentioned, players that play characters that prefer this stage genuinely did vote it a little higher. Smaller stages also saw a small uptick here, with a lot of them noting that they prefer certain starters for platform punishes and extensions, the stage to off-stage ratio, and the stage size. The top player votes didn't shift the chart around too much compared to the lower level players, except Rockwall moving up by a hair. That just about wraps up today's video. I want to give a really quick shout out and thank you to everyone who voted on the poll and gave their feedback. All your names are on screen right now, and I couldn't do this kind of content without your help. Did you agree with the poll, or do you think that we were a little bit off? Thanks tons for watching until the end, and don't forget to comment for your chance to win the Hockey Loxodont skin with the Valhalla alt. It comes with the default skin included, so you can claim it even if you don't have that. See you in the next video, and bye for now.